Welcome to the All About You podcast. My name is Sheila and I am your host. In this podcast, I invite people to tell their stories of their travels, hobbies, and passions. These podcasts are also now available on my All About You YouTube channel. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story. Welcome to the All About You podcast. And today my guest is Brian, and he's an international mixing mastering engineer, a concert technician, and a project coordinator. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila. I appreciate being here.
You are very welcome. Now, I have to say, Brian, right at the start, I have no idea what any of this means. So
Okay.
I'm happy to be educated. You're originally from the US, but you're now living in Valencia. Let's go back in time a bit. Was music always your passion?
That is correct. So when I was a younger kid, my parents wanted to, I was going through kindergarten and elementary school, but you want to be able to practice other educational courses as well. Maybe you do sports or music. So I always leaned towards the music aspect. So I learned piano when I was younger and also electric guitar. And I think that really helped harbor some of my creative interests growing up, even into my teenage years as well. In my teenage years, I got together with some friends and we did the whole hey, let's start a band kind of concept where we wrote some of our own music and did that kind of thing as well. And played a little bit of shows locally. It was fun. We tried to take it as serious as we could, but you're younger, you have limited resources, and you're not as familiar with how the world works. And then people separate and go to college, so things break up. But it was definitely a good experience, and it did influence me as I was younger.
So was that sowing the seed for a future career in the music industry?
Absolutely. So in regards to my younger teenage years, I would say 13 to 16, about a 3-year period, when we were trying to perform in a band and write these songs. That was the whole rock star mentality. We want to put music out and try to get signed and, these kind of big aspirations. At the time, didn't understand how to get there, how the process was. But we knew, okay, well, we need to have recorded material to show people, to shoot our shot. And when from the age 13 up until 16 and a half, we decided that we needed to record music, but we didn't know how, and we didn't have the money to go into a local studio and pay by the hour to get it all done. So we decided to work for a summer, save up a bunch of money, and between the 3-4 of us who were in a group at a time, we just ended up buying a bunch of audio equipment because at that time in the earlier 2000s, it was home audio equipment was more cheap and accessible to buy. So we bought the beginner home audio equipment, some microphones, and just started setting up all this gear and tried to figure it out ourselves. And we ended up recording a home demo. And that was the learn from scratch without knowing how to do anything, figure out how to record audio by yourself. And it was a tough 3 years. The recordings are terrible. But we, just jumped into the deep end and figured it out as we went on. And that sort of brought me into the interest of, well, if I can't be a rock star kind of thing, I might as well go ahead and try to use a technical skill maybe. So that was the intention of progressing through high school, continue to learn that, and then that's where I ended up in college from there.
Wow, so at college then you were there to learn all the different aspects of music production, audio, all that sort of stuff, yeah?
I was really bored with the small town that I grew up in, so by the time I was 18, I ended up getting into Middle Tennessee State University, which is right outside of Nashville, and that opened me up to be able to leave my hometown and then meet a tremendous amount of people and also have more university resources to practice technical skills, not only from how to record audio in a qualitative way, but also focus on other entertainment technologies. So concert technologies like setting up sound systems, setting up the big video walls that you would see, lights for concerts, and then also I had an opportunity to join a radio and a news program there. So they had a small television studio in the College of Media there. And I started running audio for for like the student news program as well, which actually went live on television every night. So it was this eclectic mix of understanding how to operate audio and various technologies in a variety of ways, whether it be music, concerts, a music recording studio, doing something live, or even something like this podcast, for example, but understanding heavily the audiovisual aspect of it at a collegiate level.
I think this sounds absolutely fascinating. You went to university in Nashville, the home of music. Mm-hmm. I mean, that must have been brilliant to start with.
It was, yeah. It was definitely different because it was a lot more events, a lot more concerts, a lot of which were put on by the university. The pitch for the university at the time was saying, if you screw up now, at least it will be, a university-run event or something. You kind of cut your teeth, you make those mistakes, and make them now while you're a student. And if you mess up a big production, at least it was a student production rather than, messing up a production from an employer or a high-paying client or something like that. So it was very, very aggressive and very hands-on.
I mean, one of the things that fascinates me is when you see these really big concerts, yes, you've got the group or the musician, the band there, but then you've got the special effects, you've got the backdrop, you've got the lights, you've got the audio, the microphones, the actual quality of sound from each of the musicians. The amount of work that goes into that side of things. Let's forget about the artists and the costumes and the choreography and all that sort of stuff. But lights, sound, music, backdrops, audio, visual is huge.
It is. Yeah, and oftentimes the bigger productions, they will take months to prepare. I'll give you an example with the Super Bowl for American football. They will start preparing that event anywhere between 12 to sometimes 14, 16 months in advance. So right before the Super Bowl ends, they're already planning next year's. And it's very aggressive planning. Now that's one of the biggest events that you can possibly provide, I think, for an example. But even if you want to go see a bigger artist, a medium-sized artist, or even somebody who's just doing an open mic at a cafe or something like that, you are correct. There's a tremendous amount of different sectors and branches and moving parts that need to cohesively come together to make that event a reality, and not just a reality, but an enjoyable experience that somebody will remember or pay money to get a ticket for. So it's a lot of moving pieces, and a lot can also go wrong as well.
What is one of your favourite parts? I mean, I read off quite a considerable list there of things that you do. What's one of your favourite parts of all the different things that you can do?
My favourite part is when the show is happening and everything is working fine. That's probably my favorite part. When you're able to say lights, camera, action, hit the record button, people come on, and whether you're in a home studio or a professional facility, and everything is working and there's no issues, no troubleshooting, or if it's an event or a concert and everything, the performance is happening, people are dancing in the crowd, having a good time. That's definitely my favorite part, because you're able to sit back, kind of go, whew, okay, we're good. Like nothing is going wrong. And oftentimes you need to be on standby, prepared to, the phrase is, put out a fire. If something happens, maybe a microphone dies on stage, or a video screen turns off. I mean, these things happen, and you need to act very quick when it happens live in the moment. But if you're in the studio and things mess up, you're in a more closed off the air scenario. So then in that case, you're able to have more time to fix a problem. But if there's people in a room and an event is in progress, then man, you really need to be on the ball to, put out a fire or fix anything as soon as possible. So it can be a little stressful, but my favorite part is definitely when everything is going smoothly and you can sit back and actually enjoy the event and not have to be focused on troubleshooting.
And I guess for you, I mean, if we take the example of sort of an outside live concert, whether you like the music or not, you've still got a job to do. A gig might come up and think, oh God, it's not my type of music at all. However, you are looking at the finer detail as opposed to I don't like the music or it's not my thing. So tell us about some of the stuff you have done, whether it's in a studio, let's have a look at your CV.
Yeah, so while I was my second out of 4 years in undergrad, I really wanted to try to break into doing concerts in Nashville. I had a really strong and confident grip doing all of the productions in the university, and they were sizable productions. They really wanted to prepare you, but I felt after 2 years I was ready to go. But I went to the biggest audio provider in Nashville, and it was a big warehouse of tons of audio equipment, and semi-trucks would pull up to load speakers, mixing consoles, all of the hardware and equipment in, and the semi-trucks would take off and go to a city, and you would essentially set up show like a camp, set all the gear up on stage, tear it all down. And there were technicians and engineers inside that warehouse who would be fixing speakers, preparing things, building the logistics. My second year in college, I said, well, I want to work somewhere. Like, okay, I'm pretty confident, maybe a little cocky at the time in retrospect, but I just went into Google and typed in major Nashville production houses and found the biggest and went straight to the contact page, found the CEO, found his email, and said, hey, let me work for you. I said, hey, I want to get an internship. And after a while, he got back to me and said, hey, let's have a chat. The chat ended up turning into the possibility of an internship. I go to my school and say, I'm ready for an internship in my second year. And they said, you're not ready. We only give internships to the fourth year students. And I was super mad because I had an opportunity that was incredible. I was really resentful towards the university at that second year. And but at the same time, I was feeling really ambitious. So I explained all of this to the CEO and I said, hey, they're kind of screwing me over. They're not going to allow me to accept this offer until for another 2 years. And I said, will you give me a job? I'll clean your toilets. And he said, I don't know about this. We'll see though. And this was about January. He said, I don't know about a job, but we'll see. And I said, okay, thanks for your time. And I figured, well, this is a mess. It's probably not going to work out. Fast forward to the beginning of summer, and I'm sitting in a copyright law class that talks about how to copyright your music. And I get an email that pings my laptop while I'm in class, and it's the CEO of the company. And it was about 6-7 months later from when I last talked to him, and the email had one sentence, and it said, "Hey Brian, are you ready to work?" And I'm thinking, oh my God, like there's no way that this is happening. So the next couple of days I showed up and I had a conversation in his office, and he said, you seem really passionate, you seem really ambitious. I'm going to throw you into the fire and flames, and you're either going to burn alive and fail miserably and we're going to fire you, or you're going to be one of the best and youngest technicians that we'll have on our shop for the summer. Pick your poison. And I said, well, I'll jump in the fire. Let's go ahead and do it. So it was very stressful. I learned a lot while I was there, but some of my experiences that I also had allowed me to assimilate appropriately with everybody there. And that quickly spiraled into me doing shows on the main street of Broadway in Nashville, doing some clubs, some rooftop dance parties, helping with some country artists, so on and so forth. And it was a really, really memorable and an enjoyable experience doing a lot of shows.
But you carried on at university as well as working, or did you have to quit university?
Oh, yeah. So
you were doing both?
So in the summer, I was working, because that's the summer is the best time to see shows, beautiful weather, right? So there's a lot more shows that are outside. So for the rest of the 3 summers that I was there, I would work full-time at the warehouse. A lot of it was really grueling work, doing a lot of quality control on equipment. And then they would see how hard I was working, and the warehouse had no air conditioning. It was super hot, so I'm just totally soaking wet in sweat the whole time, working on, making sure that speakers are working, coiling cables, all this kind of stuff. And they saw that hard work, and they said, okay, you're going to go do shows. We're sending you out with the guys who were, doing this for a lifetime, and then I would just have to help people. And it was really hands-on, but it was pretty cool. Yeah. So,
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was intense.
As you say, it was a huge gamble on their part.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have said, okay, fine, I'll finish the 2 years and I'll come back to you. But you said, no, I'll do it, plus continue your studies. And you must have just learned so much going out, because I guess it's like anything. You can learn so much in the university, in the classroom. Once you get out in the big wide world, that's when you really start learning. Because it's never textbook, is it?
No, not at all. And I would still contribute that I really do think that I learned more there in 3 summers' time than I did in university in 4 years.
I'm sure.
It was very intense, but it takes a certain mentality to do that. And it's interesting because after I had finally finished my 4 years of university, that was my 3rd year there at the company, I was doing a lot of bigger shows. They were putting me on with some bigger crews. For a broke college kid, I was making pretty decent money at the time, and they offered me a full-time job. They're like, no questions asked, like, keep doing this. We're going to keep sending you out on shows. You'll do tours, get in the whole bus, go around the U.S., do that kind of thing. I was at a point in my life where I said, do I maybe want to consider doing a master's, or do I want to stay here? And the big point for me to continue with my education in another area was that in touring, if you want to have a stable relationship, if you want to have a dog or a cat or a goldfish, if you enjoy sleeping in your own bed every night, you can't have those things. And if you do that until you're 30, 40, 50, 60, I mean, some of those guys out there who have been doing it since the 70s and the 80s, a lot of those guys, I mean, they've struggled with, a lot of life complications with, keeping a marriage, drug problems, so on and so forth. And not to bash techs who have been doing it, the old school rock and roll guys, but it's tough. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to, have a serious relationship. I mean, I love animals. I wanted to be able to have pets and all that kind of thing. So I said, all right, let's continue education. And I found myself in a program abroad here in Valencia, Spain, where we're having the conversation right now. And I continued pursuing audio production and having a wider understanding of technological innovations, and also focusing more on business concepts as well throughout my master's abroad here in Spain. And then, of course, I met a lovely lady along the way, and now here we are to this very day. So still here.
I mean, it's interesting you talking about the touring circuit, because when we look at some of these world tours, I mean, you look at Madonna going on tour, for example, a world tour, she's in this country for 4 nights, that country for 5 nights, da, da, da. It all sounds great, but when you think of logistics of getting the whole of that concert stage, the costumes, the special effects, the people, the props, the whole thing. I mean, it's always been called the travelling circus because there's so many people, so much equipment. When the pandemic hit, everything stopped. It must have been a nightmare because, I don't know, let's say, for example, Madonna's in Paris in the middle of a tour. She's then got to get herself, all her crew, all the equipment back to wherever they're based. What happened to the industry during this pandemic? I mean, what's your take on what happened?
Yeah, so thankfully for me, I wasn't in it at that time. I had already been here. I was working. I work more remotely these days, but I had so many of my friends back in Nashville were around during that time. People got crushed. People lost jobs. People lost a tremendous amount of money. It was economically immensely difficult. And I'm speaking more on the behalf of the stage worker and the laborer, hanging the speakers in the air, setting everything. I mean, that's very hard, laborious work. Even people who are doing the light shows and, mixing the audio live to make it sound good. Those people got absolutely crushed for about a year and a half when, countries and bureaucracy was, desperately trying to just, put together a haphazardous solution to what COVID-19 brought. And it certainly brought the live entertainment world to a screeching halt, and not just for music and concerts, but sporting events as well. A lot of people, you can certainly hope, man, that's where you want to have an emergency fund set aside in a savings account or something to hold yourself a little bit in place during a time like that. Or other people would try to go ahead and find other means of income as well. I know some people ended up helping electrical engineers, and just it's that kind of wake up moment to where you sure better hope you have another skill set to where you can at least bring in minimum wage or something to be able to keep the lights on and keep food in the fridge kind of situation.
It's an interesting point. I was reading an article the other day, and they was saying the amount of people that started podcasts during the pandemic.
Yeah, I can see the correlation. I mean, these things I think they're wake-up calls, certainly, but, I think it also comes down to mindset as well. It depends on how you want to perceive a problem that you're faced with, whether it's economical, mental, physical. I think it's kind of like glass half full, glass half empty scenario. You can either wallow in misery, or you can use that as gasoline to kind of drive yourself further and say, I'm going to absolutely find a solution to this, even if it kills me.
And I think that's an interesting point you just brought up there. One of the positive things out of the pandemic is the fact that we are all working remotely, particularly with the podcast here. During the pandemic, okay, I cannot have a conversation face to face, but let's explore Skype, let's explore Zoom, which for me personally, okay, I hadn't thought for one moment about all these people in different countries, but now it's just an everyday occurrence. What's your view on the world of podcasting? So as a technical thing, is it going to continue for the next couple of years, do you think? Or is there something else on the horizon we need to consider?
Sure. Well, I will at least start by mentioning, and this is just my own personal belief system, more on a spiritualistic level. I genuinely believe that the human experience here should always be the pursuit of learning, period. Whether you have dropped out of college, whether you've never gone to college, depending on your financial or economic background, whether you are in your, the middle of your life, or you are retired and living happily, I truly and genuinely believe that the human experience is a continual pursuit of learning, like I've just mentioned, in that if you have studied, I don't know, art or music or finance or marketing, whatever it is that you've studied as in high school or college, you should always be constantly introducing yourself to new ideas and more importantly, reading, looking at materials that are genuinely educational, not something that would lean towards conspiratorial or hoopla or whatever you might want to consider, but genuinely diving yourself into materials that are really going to open up your wider perspective of the world, whether you are 10 or whether you are pushing 100 years in age. Podcasting specifically is an excellent way to open your mind to that. And I know that we had spoke before the recording that that's something that you really value about doing your own podcast, is learning more a little bit about other people, which is kind of the theme of this podcast. But what I really love, and I'm a big fan of the Joe Rogan experience specifically, he's, I would argue, the biggest podcaster in the entire world. And what I appreciate so much about that podcast as an example is it's very similar in that he's pulling experts from all over the world and just having very truthful, honest conversations, much about topics that he doesn't understand. When Joe Rogan pulls together his audience, and he'll bring together people who have are financial veterans who are, economists who have been studying global economics for, 60 years, and you pull in and just pick their brain about something. And that's what I really love, specifically. So even though I have been brought up in an area of technology, there's a lot that I do not understand about economies and even history and math and all these other things that, I have a little grasp of it, but why not learn more? What's stopping me? The internet doesn't have to be cat videos and memes. It is a virtual library. And just like podcasts, consider it as audiobooks. So I think if you're genuinely pushing yourself to absorb, information and constantly teaching yourself, I think life is a very beautiful experience, no matter where you are.
I love that, and there's one thing I wanted to add to that. When I meet people and I'm talking about the podcast, I love it when I get the question, what exactly is a podcast? What do you do? And I always explain it, no matter what you've got an interest in, put it in the search bar and I guarantee you will find a podcast about it. And that could be somebody who's doing a podcast from their garden shed to a world-class expert doing a podcast. They're completely free, whether you've got the world-class expert or whether it's somebody who's dabbling in a particular subject. I think podcasting is just phenomenal. And as you said, it's these conversations, the education I get when I know nothing about this topic. Moving on then, what is your plan for the future? Do you have a plan as to where you want to get to?
Sure. So the pandemic was, I think, definitely an eye-opener for, I think, Fortune 500 companies all the way down to the small mom and pop store, and it affected people in many different ways. One thing that I have noticed more than ever is and also major companies with a lot of capital have realized, is that the need for an office versus the capabilities of home computers, that particular dynamic. A home office for any company, any industry nowadays is becoming immensely expensive. Your overhead costs of electricity, paying for janitors and people to clean, making sure that you're keeping the lights on, having venting. There's a million things that we could discuss. A business operating in an office, it's immensely expensive. In a hypothetical scenario, can eliminate the office. You are completely revolutionizing the capability of work by bringing people into their home or allowing people to work remotely. Now, this concept of working at home is, I believe, dependent on the industry. If you are a factory worker, you can't bring the factory into your house. So there are certain industries that this is just not capable, or if you have proprietary hardware or certain computers that use certain tools for various tasks that have to stay in an office, that office needs to stay open. But between the advancement of computer technology and communicational technology, like Zoom or Skype, there are new opportunities for people to get their work done at home or work for an employer in England but live in Taiwan or Spain or anywhere you want to go. And some people will leverage that to be able to live in places that are more beautiful or more economically appropriate. It makes sense. I think this also helps with immigrants as well, to where if you're from a war-ridden country or a place that is more economically unstable, you can now, in today's day and age, have an ability to work for an employer and be elsewhere that might provide you with more resources for yourself or your family. So to answer your question, I find myself leveraging this tremendously with the skill sets that I have previously learned in my life. And so right now, what I currently focus on is, as you mentioned earlier in the introduction, an audio mixing and mastering engineer, and I also am a production coordinator for startup companies. The audio mixing and mastering, the best that I can explain that in a nutshell is when I'm more focused on music because I'm passionate about that, but it is when somebody brings audio files to me, let's say the example of an artist. An artist says, I have recorded this song. I have drums, guitar, bass, 2 singers, a piano, and 2 synthesizers. I want to take this and make it sound radio ready for Spotify or to have on FM radio, like analog radio. You can send me those individual files soloed out, so only drums, only the guitar. Maybe they send me 20 audio files in a package over the internet, no problem, and I can take them and be able to upload them in software that allows me to blend all of these elements together, make the drums and the bass sound really groovy together, make the guitars nice and bright, sound how they should, make sure that the vocalist is, singing as beautifully as they can, and then put that all together so it's radio ready. And then those services can be invoiced directly over online, and because thanks to the internet, we can do all the payments online, we can do the file transfers online, and then I can send you the finished product, and then you have something that's professionally put together that you can confidently send your work to a radio station, pitch it to movies, whatever you might want to do. On the other hand, with production coordination, I focus more on the bigger picture of the process, from reverse engineering something to saying, this is my idea, this is my vision, my dream, whatever you want to label that as, and then say, how do we get there? Like, this is where we're at, but how do we get to actualizing this vision and manifesting it into reality with the current resources and the current budget that we have? And then what I'll do is, in this case, I'm working with startup companies to where we're able to say, what is that end goal and how are we getting there? So with one startup company I work with, it's more focused on client relations and marketing. The other startup company that I work with, and I'll be happy to name here, is titled Astro Voyage. And that is a creative collective that was conceived actually here in Valencia, and it brings a tremendous amount of people together from all different walks of life to create music that is in the genre of funk, soul, R&B, and the idea is all of the lyrics are based around spreading positive messages of love, unification, higher consciousness, a lot of more loving elements rather than drugs, sex, rock and roll, and all that kind of thing that unfortunately pop music brings into the limelight today. So we focus on more organic, wholesome music that derives from influence of the 60s and the 70s and all that kind of stuff, but with a higher spin to it as well. And then of course we focus on also doing concerts, and we also offer online services to where if somebody needs help putting their own song together, you can actually work directly with one of our musicians or one of our technicians to make your creative idea reality.
So basically, you could be sitting at your dining room table here in Valencia and you're working with artists, musicians all over the world.
That's exactly what I do, yeah.
And everything's whizzing across the internet, whether it's music files, invoices, Q&As.
Absolutely, yeah. So I work with, as of right now, I have a few artists that I'm working with. I have one in South Korea, for example. I'm working with somebody else who's based in Italy, but they're in Spain right now. I also work with somebody who's from Manchester, someone from London, and then a lot of various people from the United States as well, all kind of scattered over. Most of it's from the United States, but a few in England, a few in Asia as well. So yeah, it's definitely exciting. I love it.
I mean, if we think about it, you're going to sit in Valencia and you are working with all these people on their dreams, their passions of their careers in music. That must be very, very satisfying.
A lot of times people have the idea or the vision and they don't really know where to go with it. So that's what I try to help talk people through. And I'll give you a really silly analogy. Bear with me here. But here's my silly example. I'm hungry. We actually didn't have lunch, so I am kind of hungry realistically. But so to say, I'm hungry. The solution would be to fill my stomach with delicious food. That's the end goal, is the solution for me to solve my problem. The solution is for me no longer to be hungry. Okay, now let's reverse engineer this. And this is the analogy to where I help people with production coordination and understanding where we're going. I need to get some food in my stomach. Well, how do I do that? Well, I could eat a sandwich to put in my stomach. Okay, well, if I need a sandwich, how do we make a sandwich? Well, my favorite sandwich has bread, tomato, lettuce, maybe some turkey, whatever it is, some things to make it. Okay, well, I don't have any food in my house, so where do I get the bread, the tomato, and all of these things? Well, I need to go to the store. Okay, well, how do I go to the store? I can walk, ride a bike, take my car. Okay, well, once I'm at the store, what do I need to do? Well, I need to find all throughout the different areas of the store where these items are. Once I do that, okay, now how do I get these items? Well, I need to pay for it. So then what's my budget? Do I have money with me? Is it cash? Is it card? Okay, I pay for these items, and now we just walk back our whole steps. I go back home, I get into my kitchen, I make my sandwich, and I eat that sandwich. Now I'm full, I'm happy. We've solved a problem, and that is the process to be able to get there. So it's a silly example, but a lot of people have trouble walking it backwards from their initial intention. People dream big. They say, I want to do all of these things, but they can only see the end of the road and they get lost on that road getting there. So that's what I try to specialize in with creatives, but also startup businesses as well. If people need a little bit extra help in terms of other logistics that come along the way.
I think it's very interesting what you said about reverse engineering, because often we all have like a passion project and we feel passionately about it. We are right in the centre of it. But for somebody on the outside, they can take an objective view. Okay, I appreciate your passion, but we need to get you from A to Z. And we need to take all these individual steps. Whereas the artist, or, this is our vision for our project or our service. And it's somebody saying, okay, I understand that. Mm-hmm. You keep your passion. I'm going to break it down. And we just need to work through steadily all these steps.
Right. Well, I genuinely think even with setting goals for anybody, it could be weight loss, it's anything. You can apply this to absolutely anything. But I think the baby steps and consistency combined together that's what's going to get you down the road. So even like the example of weight loss, like, okay, I want to lose, 10 kilos. Okay, well, you can't go to the gym once for 8 hours and expect results. But even if you apply yourself to do, small cardio for, let's say 3 minutes, like let's get as small as you can. Jump up and down for 3 minutes a day. You will get further down that road than if you just go to the gym once for 8 hours and kill yourself on a machine, and fall apart and pull your muscles all out. And so it's the small, consistent steps, I think, whether it's more of a creative, a financial, or a business-oriented idea. It's the small baby steps in keeping things consistent.
I think this conversation is just so fascinating.
Thank you.
Brian, anything you want to add before we finish?
Not particularly. I guess the big thing is just, for people who are listening, make sure that you're able to, just if you do have an idea in mind that you want to pursue, don't be so focused on what other people tell you, because other people will have an objective. People are biased. They're objective to your ideas, and oftentimes you're almost better off just keeping things to yourself. Like if you really, really want to do something, instead of shouting it from the rooftops, keep it to yourself, really, really focus in on what it is that you want to do. And before you jump into everything, take the time to do a little bit of pre-planning or pre-production before you jump into the deep end. So, if it is, we'll go back to the example of being hungry. If you do need a sandwich, make sure you have the money. Make sure that you either have a bicycle or gas in your car. Make sure that the store is open and you can get there during opening hours. These things of preparing ahead and focusing on pre-planning or pre-production is going to save you a lot of stress when you're actually in the deep end of doing things. and you're going to achieve results a lot faster and with a lot better efficiency as well.
Well, I have to say, I do feel we've had a 2-for-1 here. We've talked about your industry, but equally, the information you have given us can refer to anything.
Absolutely.
You've got a project, break it down, keep the passion, but slowly work through all those individual steps.
And the same applies to the concert industry as well, bringing it back full circle. I mean, like you said earlier in our conversation, there's the lights, there's the costumes, there's sound, all of these different things. I mean, every single specific sector has its own course of reverse engineering. Like, think of the costumes. Well, how do we get all the costumes? There's a whole element of designing the costumes. How do we, optimize sound systems? There's a whole entire reverse engineered course for that. How do we sell tickets? Starting big and then subtracting things down, dividing it up into different sectors of work that needs to be completed, and then the smaller baby tasks, and then just be consistent with it, chip away at it every day.
I think there's some great advice there. Brian, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe on whatever platform you are using. It is free, and if you would like to tell your story, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.